Hi, welcome back to Malestrum. Today we're going to follow up on a conversation that got a pretty good response last week. And the title of that was The End of Optimism, where we were speaking about the impact of AI and the general malaise, the outlook that different generations have in regarding to the impact of AI. Today we're going to take a look at the future and give you our opinion on what we think AI is going to do and change over the next 5 years. And there's a number of different components to AI that we're going to talk about. We think of AI, we think of chat or Claude, and that's correct. But within the realm of AI, there's a lot of other variables. And those include vibe coding and automation and robotics and other uses of artificial intelligence and faster processors and the other things driving the world right now. So, Griff, why don't you start by giving us your snapshot of where things are now versus where they're going to be in 5 years?
Yeah, now things are crazy. 5 years, who knows? All right, that's our episode. We'll see you next time. Just kidding. Um, yeah, so when AI is used in casual conversation, it's generally associated with language models like ChatGPT or Claude, as my dad said. But from a computer science standpoint, AI is much broader than that. And it's been around for many decades. We're talking about more formal symbolic AI, which is basically one specific use case versus the broader application of the written word and language. And now there's, as my dad said, we have AI that's still specialized to particular tasks, but completely advanced from what it was many decades ago. And I honestly have no clue what's going to happen in the next 5 years. I think staying educated and using these tools, but still thinking critically, that's important. This this initial perspective among machine learning researchers, which is like one aspect of what we call AI in casual conversation, they were surprised about this perspective from this paper called Attention is All You Need. And related to that, in prior developments of AI, if you scale up the amount of data being used to train it, it would essentially plateau in terms of how much more accurate the output is relative to however much more input you give it or training data you put into the model. What was really surprising about these newer language models is that it was actually a different type of relationship where you could pour in exponentially more information and you have exponentially more accurate of a result, which was entirely surprising. But even that had a plateauing effect as well, where but it turned out that was only good to a certain extent. Back in like late 2024, people at OpenAI and Anthropic got really optimistic about the capabilities of these language models, and all these investors were pouring so much money into these systems. Now they're dialing it back a little bit, and instead of just pouring more compute, more training data, it's more so about fine tuning the architecture of the models. So instead of DeepSeek is a big example of this from 2 years ago, where instead of having like more information in AI and thus creating a more accurate output, DeepSeek used something called mixture of experts, where it was able to interpret what kind of problem you're solving and go down different routes from there. If you're solving a math problem versus a history problem, that would take a different kind of brain. So that's why it's called mixture of experts. It chooses from the right brain at the right time, basically. I think these changes will be more so on the architectural level. My point is that from a scientist perspective, who the hell knows? No one could predict it because people are like, wait, there's an expectation here that if we add more information, it'll plateau. but then it didn't. It got way better, but then it did plateau. So then they messed with the architecture, and then it did get better, but only to an extent. We're at the point where no one really knows, but I feel as though the capabilities of these technologies are reaching this kind of flat rate of progression. But what is going to be more prevalent and useful are specific implementations of language models. And one example of that is in very specific business use cases, having AI integrated within the software in ways that actually help people and make processes more efficient. Actually, that will continuously keep maturing even when, let's say, this technology doesn't advance that much more. uh, the smart integration of this technology will keep getting more mature and advanced, and then therefore keep improving or keep making AI more prevalent. Another example is the software I'm building, the educational app LoonSynth aims to do that as well. So that's a long technical explanation there to your question. What do you think?
I'm not sure I understood most of that. I'll give you my
Mhm.
take from a English major business guy's view. I think there's three factors that if we look at where we are now versus where we're going, I'll share these as my concerns. One is the slowing of hires coming into companies and in turn their inability to have mentors and really learn. The other thing is, like me, there's a lot of older people out there who are either at retirement age or they're not going to stay in the workplace. Oddly, we see two things going on right now. One is a slowing down in hiring, and then we also see in some sectors where there's been a rehiring of people with experience and hopefully judgment. So we've got two factors. We've got people that aren't getting the same timeline to be able to come in and learn how to think. The second thing is we have people with experience that are leaving the marketplace. So that's one factor is the components of AI that we don't talk about as much. When we talk about AI, a lot of people look at it as a superpowered Google. You ask a question, how do I sew a dress or whatever it is, and you get very detailed answers. The reality, the sweeping changes that are likely to come are the things that aren't quite as topical, such as vibe coding. Vibe coding allows anyone in any language using tools like Claude Code or OpenAI Chat's Codex to be able to prompt into a computer and have that computer actually generate code so you can create your own websites and protocols and do other stuff with it. That's going to be a huge impact.
Not only like a nice looking website, but also capabilities and what we call full stack software, where it's like what in the front and the back and the middle, everything. So it's these coding tools, the command line tools are getting better at interpreting all parts of the software too.
Yeah, exactly. And doing that affects a whole sector of people that were solely employed to develop. And those developers are using vibe coding to be able to create more things now. But what it allows is for smaller companies, one or two person companies, to be very scalable because they can really create whatever digital environment that they're trying to achieve. That also means that, and this is where I think the big impact is going to be, and that's in robotics and automation. If you look at the companies that are going to be around in 5 years, no matter what we say about trying to move jobs back to America, whatever we do is going to have less labor content. It's going to have less labor content from mold making all the way to assembly. So you've got a whole nother sector that is going to be impacted for what we typically would call blue collar workers or workers that are actually using their hands who are going to be affected by those jobs either becoming very compressed or they're simply going to go away. Here in Santa Fe, Amazon just opened a huge distribution center, even though there's only about 80,000 people here in Santa Fe. And it's because they can cover a fairly large region because New Mexico is not densely populated and provide services of one day shipments, even in states like this, because they're mostly doing pick and pack, picking something from a shelf and packing it for shipment using robotics or using QR codes or using whatever technology that streamlines the process. The other thing that's an unknown, and I think this is something that we really, as a country, haven't discussed much, and that's regulation. Data centers eventually are going to draw, supposedly, as much power as cities and residential areas and other factories. And that power consumption, even if they get more efficient, is the cap on how much AI can grow. You have to have significant amounts of resources, electricity, water, power, in order to support ever growing data centers, at least the way we manage data currently. And I think we're going to see a lot of pushback. We already see it on where those data centers are going to be made, how they're used, how many resources they're going to take. And that's going to force a change in the way the core, you have two core needs in AI. One are the chips, ever sophisticated chips, where they're made, who can make them, how fast they can make them. And the other thing is the data management side, the data processing centers. So if we see more regulation in the area of data processing, eventually that's going to be the cap that Griff was talking about. The other thing that we will likely see, at least in some countries, the same way that we see management of social media now, is regulation on how quick jobs are replaced. Right now, it's in every company for itself process where they're all trying to get smarter and smarter AI agents, where the ultimate goal is to have something that's really capable of thinking.
But just jumping off that, so we have various organizations that are trying to come in there have software replace people. They fire all these employees. They're like, this software uses these high tech AI agents to get the job done of 25 white collar people and engineers and stuff, which may be partially true. But what do we see that happens in many instances? They integrate the software. They're like, this software sucks or it's buggy or it doesn't account for these edge cases. And then they're like, wait a minute, we actually need all these people to come back and fix the systems or do things the old way.
Well,
So I want to get your thoughts on
that
that.
ties well
Yeah.
to the first point, which is the lack of traditional growth into a job, which in my case, I had no business experience. So fortunately, I had the time to have a hands-on learning experience on everything from unloading trucks to shipping to everything else. And that type of entry-level job, either through automation or robotics, or just the lack of new hiring is in jeopardy. And the reason a lot of these companies are rehiring people is because judgment and experience still have a lot of value. The other reality for replacing workers with AI is that there is a cost for it. You have something that's called a token, which is the small component, almost like a bit of energy that companies use. The more complex the project, the more tokens they need to be able to process.
A
And
token is like a word, but like how computers see words. That's how I describe it.
that's right. That's a
Mhm.
better way to say it. But the reality is, in some cases, companies have found that workers who don't really understand token consumption or it isn't regulated can spend tens of thousands of dollars a month doing repetitious tasks, basically starting a project over and over again, and they wind up with enormous 10, 20, $25,000 charges from Anthropic or from OpenAI.
Yeah, from a engineering standpoint, so those more like autonomous tasks, they have a lot of potential, such as with OpenClaw, software like that, where they integrate these tools like Claude Code or Codex or the different APIs. They essentially allow them to use more tokens for a broader task, which is cool, but also has the potential to be a lot more inefficient. Where if whatever integration you have for agentic AI is not designed well, you're setting money on fire, as you were saying, where you're wasting all these tokens on certain outputs that may or may not be actually helping the business with whatever it needs.
Well, it's because it really is an identified cost. What's going to change, and we see it with Anthropic's newest, most powerful release version, Fathom, is
People.
Fable, is that it's later this month going to go to a per token billing amount, which means that the more data or the more processes that you use, potentially, even though token charges are going down, it's going to be more expensive. So, all that said, Griff, where do you see with those restrictions where companies are going to be in 3 to 5 years?
Before I answer your question, there's a term token maxing. In some ways, I'm doing that too, where if you're still overseeing whatever the AI does and you're using a lot of tokens to do testing and validate your output, whatever, using more tokens could be helpful, but there's also diminishing returns in certain instances. You asked me where I see where things would be in 5 years. Yeah, I think to combining what we said, both of us, is we'll have all these organizations that would be acting maybe a bit too much in a rash way, where they're laying off far too many people trying to impress shareholders by focusing on the bottom line. And of course, employees are the largest, most significant expenses. So if we fire these people, we'll have more net profit for the shareholders and replace them with AI. And then they're like, wait a second, things are breaking. It's like you probably maybe you've seen those viral clips of Taco Bell where they people are driving through these fast food restaurants and it's all AI taking your order. But these people mess with the AI. They're like, I want 100,000 bottles of water, and it crashes the whole system for the night, which is like one funny extreme example. But what I mean is that like AI is powerful, but may not account for those edge cases. And especially when there's not humans like there in the loop in the moment to verify it, that could cause many more issues down the line. I think the implementation of AI will get more mature, but also C-suite executives would realize when and how humans would be necessary to actually validate and verify the output. And my concern is, despite all of that, those humans in the loop would still be those already on the career ladder, and things would still be very challenging for people starting their careers, where you could have experienced professionals there to verify the output because they know the protocols in the industry. But if you don't have that mentorship, if you don't have that pipeline, what does that imply for the future of employees and workers? If there's no entry level employees now or fewer of them, what does that mean for the 20 years from now, the senior employees?
That's a very good question. And that's one of the limitations that the reality side of what AI can do and what it can't do is going to come into play. The things that I see, though, that are already in play are not necessarily the AI that we think about, but it's the ability to produce much less expensively and much quicker small robots. And a great example of that is the war in Ukraine and the war in Iran. Part of the reason that both of those countries have succeeded or survived, maybe a better word, survived against massive, complex industrial organizations because, for example, in Ukraine, they can produce 1 million drones or more every week. And the cost of those drones gets cheaper and cheaper as they learn how to use automated manufacturing process, extruded plastics. And you say, well, that's not AI. Yes, it is, because they're using different ways of controlling those drones. Some of it actually, even now, is relatively low tech. Some of the more successful drone hits actually are tethered to miles and miles of fiber optic cable. And it's like having a giant extension cord. Those days are going to end soon. The bigger impact on all of us, I believe, is going to be in the case of automation and robotics. China built more robots than the world combined last year. And when we think of robots, we think of a humanoid servant that's in your house and Sounds like a person, acts like a person.
The Boston Dynamics funny robot that does backflips and stuff and falls down on the floor and
Yeah,
gets back up.
but the reality is we're surrounded by robotic processes all the time, from ice makers to a lot of the things in our house. And yes, we will get to the, I would say within 3 to 5 years, where we have assisted living facilities and maybe even in normal homes where robots are capable of doing things for people that have ambulatory issues. The bigger impact is going to be, though, on the work floor where people are producing things.
This study that I will cite in the description because I don't remember the name of it, um, essentially tested this scenario where you have a human and you have a robot given, you know, relatively simple tasks that still require coordination, such as if you're working in an Amazon warehouse and you're sorting between packages, and essentially you have to make sure that a package has to fit these criteria. Robots are now better at that than humans are. And there's more and more examples where that sense of space and understanding the relationship of objects between each other, computer vision models and how they interface with artificial intelligence are getting better and better at those types of specialized tasks. And just like how, from the nerdy scientific standpoint, we have model architecture like with DeepSeek, with a mixture of experts model, where it's able to look at a problem, be like, which part of my brain should I use to solve this problem? I think we'll have more specific integrations and implementations where computer vision, robotics could be used to be able to look at a certain problem, be like, okay, what part of my brain should I use? And now it's more so specialized. You have one robot for one task. But I think it'll, these implementations of robotics and AI will be used for more general applications, is what I mean. Just like how DeepSeek was architected better for more efficient general applications using less compute.
I, that's exactly right. The reality is, people that are efficient in the AI world are using multiple AI agents. They're using basically a fleet of AI agents to manage a task. And they're assigning tasks to different agents, and then the agents are managed by another agent who can verify what they're doing and how they're doing it.
With Claude Code, it's now like Claude Code is doing that without you asking, where it'll generate sub agents and have them coordinate together based on a broader goal.
Yeah, Griffin and I have been involved, supported one of the two other businesses that we have in a lot of tech conferences. We were in Austin a week before last, and in New Mexico, because of Los Alamos Labs and Sandia Labs, there's a lot of tech, even in places like New Mexico. And one of the interesting things that one of the scientists said from Los Alamos was that basically the way they're developing things and researching is not anywhere close to what they used to do. Now they're having models of testing done where it's basically digitally created, digitally tested. And then they verify that through a series of other AI agents who they've given personalities of scientists from the past, from Oppenheimer to Einstein and others. And those AI agents will debate with each other about whether or not the process, the concept, the testing protocols, and the results are valid. So basically, there's scientists involved, but some of those scientists have been gone for decades. But they're taking their persona and they're using the information in the way they thought in order to vet what they're doing.
And if such a highly regulated environment like Los Alamos National Labs is using AI in that way, which I think is really cool, funny in some ways, if they're using it like that, and additionally, I attended several conferences and networking events in Austin, Texas, and I was surprised, like essentially every software engineer who I spoke with is like very extensively using AI, which is more so than I would have expected. But I guess it's gotten to the point where, for example, this was discussed at with Los Alamos, how when language models were a newer thing, of course there was more hesitancy. They're like, let's not use it because it's gonna take our data from us, which it still probably is. But now it's becoming more ubiquitous, where essentially everyone's using it. So if you're not using it, you're an engineer, then you're behind, essentially.
That's exactly right. And when you think about it, you can put a whole concept into different parcels. So you've got one part of a concept being created and vetted by one AI agent, you have something else being done by someone else. So in essence, they have their own security checks because that AI agent may be only seeing a part of something that's very confidential or very controlled. Now, someone has to aggregate all that at some point, but in the digital world, they can do that with less people touching it. So we've touched on a lot of different things today. This has been a little bit more of a techie conversation. And I think in the upcoming episodes of the third phase, we're going to try to give you a taste of some of the trends and things that we see. We're going to give you some basic lessons on how to vibe code at some point. And we're going to share with you some of the experiences that we have. Our plan is to be in Austin for most of the month of October, actually working in the environment there, trying to understand more of what's leading edge and where the trends are. The big positive thing I see right now that I'm going to turn the conclusion over to Griff is that AI and all the ramifications of it are frightening for a lot of people. I think, and they should be frightening because unless you're really focused on trying to understand what's going on and where it can lead, you're going to be, as we used to say, pigeonholed into a world that you don't understand. The other side, the positive side, though, is anyone now can become an entrepreneur. Anyone now can decide that they're going to build a scalable business if they're smart enough to be able to use the systems correctly.
You need time and resources, I'd say.
You do. You need time and resources, and you need experience. I worked on a business plan for Breakwater Operations, which is our consulting business. And I was working through the business plan with AI. And even though it's very sophisticated and it can pull from all kinds of information,
You have
50 years of pattern matching and also a good sense of what's real and not. So there were probably 45 different queries or prompts involved in using that AI group of agents to be able to create a viable business plan. So, Griff, on on your conclusions, what would you like people to think about?
What were we talking about again? Wasn't paying attention.
Yeah, exactly. So, what would you like to wrap up with, and what are some of the themes that you want to focus on in upcoming episodes?
Yeah, I want to go on another 5-hour technical tangent. Just kidding. I'd say just keep learning. And I tell myself this, it's easy to get comfortable in whatever narrative feels the best to me. So whether it's about AI or other stuff, I say seek perspectives I disagree with, seek people in person who see the world differently from me, and just try to be empathetic and understanding, because it's so easy now to, we always talk about echo chambers, to fall down rabbit holes of whatever we already believe in. So I'll conclude it with that. In regards to everything else we've talked about with state of the world and the job market, I aim to keep challenging myself. And for whoever's watching, I want to spread that challenge as well to everyone else.
Next year, I'm going to turn 75. And I'm actually more optimistic and more enthusiastic about the opportunities that are out there now than I was 50 years ago. One of the things that I'd like to do in some of the upcoming episodes is we're meeting a lot of people who are really very smart and are working in a variety of different startups. I think it would be great. And they range from all kinds of ages, from people that are very young that used to work for the labs or they've done other startups. It would be great if we can have some of those people that are doing startups join us in a couple of these shows and let you see their perspective. We have one guy who's done 3 successful startups who would be a great guest to bring in and let them share with you their realities because they've been involved in this sector for 25 years before AI was called AI. So, anyway, thank you for your time. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.